Welcome to a football show, Monday edition here, of course, on 440 Sports, Broadway Sports Media, Stacking the Inbox, F Words Pod, at Braden Gall, at F Words Pod, Zach Lyons. I am Braden. How are you, Zach? What's going on, man?
Good. It's Combine week, and I love the Combine. I know that you
Oh, you
find it
do?
totally useless, but I think there's a lot of takeaways you can get out of it, and it's a good old time.
I do not think it's totally useless. I don't understand the Underwear Olympics as a television product. I don't understand watching it. Give me the results. And we're going to get into this because today we're going to talk Combine. What are the ways you should be watching the Combine? What are the most important parts of the Combine? Maybe even some projections on what we think is going to happen around these quarterbacks, because I do think there's going to be some like drastic overreactions from some people. You may not agree with that. That's going to be my prediction a little bit later on.
Braden, there's drastic overreactions about everything that happens in the NFL.
Or dare we say everything that happens in the world.
In the world.
If you want to find an overreaction about like angel hair pasta, I'm pretty sure you could find it on Twitter somewhere. Somebody losing their mind about some stupid nonsense. So either way, we're going to...
I'm sure there's pasta rankings.
We will debate and discuss how you should watch the Combine, some of the quarterback situations, what's going to happen this week. Again, how to watch it is really the most important thing. What's the most important part of the Combine? And we're going to talk a little bit because the Preds, of course, David Poile announcing the general manager that he is going to step down at the end of the season. Barry Trotz, patron son, beloved son, former head coach, is now back and is going to be a general manager, but general manager for the first time. And so is there anything that the Tennessee Titans and football fans in this city can learn from the Predators, or maybe in a good or a bad way, potentially? So just two organizations, the two biggest professional sports franchises in this city, going through an incredible amount of change, basically all at the same time. So really, really interesting being at that press conference on Monday. And then, of course, Derrick Henry trade rumors are swirling everywhere. So what would that actually look like? What are the implications? What is his trade value?
Is it a legitimate rumor? I think that's the big thing.
And what should the Titans do? I mean, we'll work through every piece of it, and then what should the Titans do? Kingston Group and the Pharmacy, of course, are two great, awesome sponsors here on the show. So make sure you go to the Pharmacy, get yourself a good burger, some great mustard, some great tots. You got the brats over there. You got a great beer garden. And I know it's a little windy on Monday, but the rain is through. So it's nice time to go sit in the afternoon and have a beer and a burger over there at the Pharmacy. So make sure you check that out. And, of course, the Kingston Group, buildkg.com is the website. Never make a big decision about your home financially, renovations, buying, selling, whatever. Doesn't matter. Don't make a big decision about your house until you just have a conversation with them. Just consult with the Kingston Group, buildkg.com. Stackingtheinbox.com as well. Sign up for that. And make sure you jump into the comment section here as we will be chatting throughout the course of the show. I think that covers all the bills we need to pay, Zach. I think it's time to dive into this. So I don't know where the rumors started. Maybe it just sort of is one of those things, because we've kind of been talking about which pieces are next, and we talked about Derrick Henry on Thursday's show after all the cuts.
It started with what we talked about before the show, and I'll let you explain what you heard in your research, but it started with Jeff Darlington's article. And of course, in Nashville, when someone writes an article or tweet that is about the Titans, even if it's just a small section, then there's going to be A to Z, Music City Miracles, Titans Sized, and Titans Wire fighting over who can get that article out first. So, I think one of them was the Titans were not even listed as a favorite for Aaron Rodgers or something, and then you get an article. I want to throw out odds every time there's some stupid news story about the Titans to see, okay, we're going to keep track. Who did it first? Did A to Z win this one? Or did Music City Miracles? Or what about Titans Wire?
So, basically, who's a faster aggregator of content is what you're asking.
Aggregator of content that could be written by an AI. I wouldn't be surprised if all these websites turned to Chat GPT all of a sudden.
But BuzzFeed, this is a true story, a little off topic, but BuzzFeed did some stuff like that and announced that they were going to do some stuff like this. Their stock price went up.
Yeah, I heard Sports Illustrated is starting to dive into it as well. I caught a glimpse of a show talking about that. I wouldn't be surprised, but that's why you should go to stackingtheinbox.com, where you actually have a real human write about things that matter.
Never written. Stacking the Inbox, never written by a robot.
Never written by a robot.
John Oliver just did a whole bit on AI this past weekend, so on last week tonight. So I definitely recommend that. We talked a little bit about it on Lamestream Sports a couple episodes ago as well. It's gonna take some like jobs away from people, but it's gonna be like the 300 word aggregator where it's like, oh, this topic is trending. It's exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Jeff Darlington goes on First Take and says one thing about how I'm speculating that the Buffalo Bills could be interested in acquiring Derrick Henry, and then every website in the world, both in Buffalo, of course, and in Nashville, have to at least repeat that. But really, you're not doing any work. You're just putting this was said on First Take by some guy. And again, Jeff Darlington.
They put the story, then they put where the Buffalo Bills finished, okay, and how the Buffalo Bills season ended last year. And then it goes into Derrick Henry's season last year. And that is the article.
Yeah,
it's just frivolous, not bullshit nonsense that it just infuriates me.
Well, and this is not just a small like digital startup problem. Like this is the Tennessean is largely just a
look what they did with Sports Illustrated. They remove John Glennon and David Beauclair and go to a bunch of no names that are just writing the same shit everybody else is writing.
Well, technically, Athlon Sports, I think, is underneath the
sorry,
Sports Illustrated Arena Group.
sorry to your employer.
It's all right. I'm only like a consultant. It's fine.
Hey, at least you guys still have magazines.
For now, for now, go buy an Athlon Sports magazine. By the way, coming up in a few months.
So Braden does not get replaced by robots.
See, it's not all that crazy to think about this stuff. But again, if you want nuanced written content by a human,
stackingtheinbox.com.
You want
or
real
Sober's Network. I see Stoney's in there, but Sober's Network.
Yeah, there you go.
They're all humans. I can verify.
Can we prove that we're not robots right now on the screen? I don't know.
Oh, I definitely can prove it because I emote and cuss. I don't think robots can do that.
Oh, yes. Are you kidding? Have you seen what they do? They just turn into. Now we're down a whole other rabbit hole.
Real robots, not AI.
They do some weird shit. AI does, that's for sure. Trying to get a reporter to leave his wife, hilarious. Anyway, so Derrick Henry, so Jeff Darlington is a pretty good reporter for ESPN, and I don't think, from what I understand, he doesn't float something like and he was very clear in how he spoke about it on the air when he said, look, this is just sort of like me speculating here. And that's kind of the phrase he used, is that the Buffalo Bills would be interested or be a perfect landing spot for Derrick Henry to be kind of complete the package there instead of relying so heavily on Josh Allen to be the power running attack, take some weight off his shoulders. No, so Rose, Jeff Darlington is not, in fact, a robot. But it's not the only team that I have heard is interested in potentially seeing what Derrick Henry would be worth. And I think there's a couple of questions here, Zach, which is financially, what does it all mean? Titans basically can save $6 million and some change with any trade. But really, what is his value to both the Titans and what is his value on the open trade market? I think is a far more interesting question.
Well, it's a very interesting question. And me and Mike were talking about it the other day, not on just, in passing, not on the podcast Football and Other F Words award winning, but we were talking about it and we were wondering how important is Derrick Henry hitting 100 touchdowns and hitting 10,000 rushing yards with the Titans for the Titans, because you also have the fact of the emotionality and sentimentality attached to this by not only the fans, but also by Mike Vrabel, because obviously Mike Vrabel has built a relationship with Derrick Henry, values Derrick Henry's leadership, values what he's done for the franchise. And bringing it up to the A.J. Brown trade, you saw how he reacted to A.J. Brown. We don't know really what is going on behind the scenes between Rand Carthon, Mike Vrabel, and how they're viewing the state of this roster. And we'll get to it a little bit in the Preds. I don't think the Titans trade Derrick Henry. I would be happy if they traded Derrick Henry. That's kind of where I land on it. I don't think they are, because I think that all that stuff that I just mentioned is important to Mike Vrabel. And I think it's important for Rand Carthon as well. They have a sure-handed, chain-moving running back that is of high caliber right there. The problem is that he's about to be on the wrong side of 30, and very, very few, maybe 10
Eric
running
Dickerson.
backs in the history of the NFL continue the trend of getting 1,000-yard plus seasons
Yeah.
when they hit 30. So
and very
it's a weird
few
situation to be in right now.
and very few after the workload he's had. There's all kinds of data, 1,500 carries, 29 years old, there's all kinds of stuff. And then one season where you get like just insanely run into the ground like he's had with all the touches. I still think he's also a rare human specimen. I've said this for a long time. He is sort of like the human evolution experiment against the NFL playing out in front of us. Like, can the human body evolve beyond an NFL defense? And Derrick Henry's like the best chance to show that some of those metrics can be blown through. I think so. Here's the question: do you think he could get it all in 1 year? He's at what 8,300 or so. He would need a 1,700-yard season to get to 10,000, which is of course the franchise record with Eddie George. He's already got all the other touchdown records. So you're saying that? I guess the question is, what's the draft pick that he is worth for both sides? And is that, and plus the $6 million savings and the ability to replace him fairly easily, which not Derrick Henry level, but you can find a running back pretty easily. So
that's the thing. I am very surprised that there are multiple teams interested in Derrick Henry. I mean, I know that sounds weird to say, but if you look at the running back draft class and if you look at the running back free agent market, it doesn't really make a lot of sense to be interested in Derrick Henry unless they think he's going to be cheap. Like, unless they think, hey, we can get Derrick Henry for like a 5th-round pick probably from the Tennessee Titans. Now,
you think third? What's cheap in your mind? Like 4th and beyond?
What I just said.
Why? Fifth is.
Wait, what? Are you even listening to me?
Well, I heard you say 5th round, but it doesn't mean 4th. 4th is. I'm just asking where the line is. Like, would you?
I think when I say cheap, I think like a 5th-round pick. Now, I also think that is not what the Titans are going to want back. I think the Titans are going to want at least 2 picks back. And I think that's what they should be asking if you look at the Christian McCaffrey trade. Now, I'm not saying like it's a 1st and a 1st or a 1st and a 2nd. I think that if you're getting a 3rd and a 4th or a 3rd and a 5th, you send his ass out of here.
3rd and a 5th. You would do it for a 3rd and a 5th.
Oh, my God. I'd send it away in a heartbeat. Like, what good is a running back? Like, in this day and age with the free agent market and with the draft class, I'd be sending his ass so fast out of here. I'd pack his bags and say, hey, I see that you're working out with Von Miller. Just stay right there. Hitch a ride back to Buffalo with him. Like, that's it. I wouldn't trade him to Buffalo, by the way. I would not trade him to any AFC team. It would have to be an NFC team.
AFC contender, yeah. Trey says 3rd and a 6th would be good enough. I do think that's about right. I think he is. Here's the thing. I think he is worth less than people realize. I think he is worth more to the Titans for a variety of reasons. You already talked about all the off-the-field sort of sentimental reasons, but he's also worth more because this team doesn't have a lot of true playmaking weapons on offense at the skill positions. And frankly, he fits their identity for now, at least. We don't know exactly what the offense could evolve into in the future. But with Tannehill, and again, Ed makes a good point here, too. I think Derrick Henry trade is good as long as it also includes a Tannehill trade as well. Need as many picks as possible. I agree that you need as many picks as possible. I do think there's a combination there between Ryan Tannehill and Derrick Henry that makes some sense in terms of continuity. And we're going to get into this when we talk about trading off as many pieces as possible, the way the Preds are doing right now with a transition to a new GM. And can the Titans still win? Because we all think Vrabel hates tanking, which I think is true. I think a 3rd and a 6th is probably the best you're going to do. I don't think they're going to. I don't think his value is. McCaffrey is a significantly different player. He's got some injury problems, but it's a significantly younger, significantly different type of player. I think he's got value, and I think teams are interested. But I think there's going to be it would have to be a really good offer.
I just don't see 2 teams. I don't see the Titans coming to terms with the team that makes sense for them to trade Derrick Henry. I just don't think there is going to be a two. Even if it's just 1 pick and it's 1 second, I'd still trade him. Like, at this point, and the people who say, well, you got to trade Tannehill. If you trade Henry, you got to trade Tannehill. No, you don't. Let me tell you something. You don't have to do anything. They could stick with both of them. They could trade Tannehill and keep Henry. They could trade Henry and keep Tannehill. Let me tell you something. These guys, these 2 players are not symbiotic. If you're trading away Derrick Henry and you keep Ryan Tannehill, that makes sense to me. Like, it totally makes sense because quarterback is an entirely different position of value, an entirely different position than the running back. We saw Derrick Henry leave this team, and nothing changed as far as rushing efficiency back in
Yeah.
2021. It's not going to be the same and as simple as replacing Ryan Tannehill.
No, I don't think they're connected. I think it's more about you get the best possible deal. You look at every player on your roster. If you're Rand Carthon, your job, in theory, is to look at every player on your roster and say, can I get value for this asset, or do we need this asset? Should I pay more for this asset, pay less for this asset, replace this asset? His entire job is asset management. And so if Derrick Henry can get him a second round pick, which I don't think he will, but if Derrick Henry can get him a second round pick, I think you have to consider making the deal. If Tannehill can get you a second and a third, you make the deal. Like there are, and they're separate. What I mean is that both of these two pieces are more valuable to the Titans than they are to potentially other teams.
Well, not necessarily.
I think.
And here, it's hard to say that because if Ryan Tannehill and Derrick Henry get traded, they're obviously more valuable to the other team.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, in the sense of how trades work, I mean, that's entirely now. I look at it this way. Dov Kleiman is one of the regurgitating aggregators of Titans or of NFL Twitter is regurgitating Albert Breer. And Albert Breer is reporting that the Jets are exploring all options at quarterback because they're not close to a deal with Derek Carr, and Derek Carr's, I guess, dicking them around or whatever, including bringing back Geno Smith as starter. They're also looking at veterans such as Daniel Jones, Ryan Tannehill, and Jimmy Garoppolo, in addition to Rodgers and Carr.
Yep.
So this is from Albert Breer, and this makes sense. And I still think, I don't care what they do with Henry. I think that trading Tannehill is the best idea. I don't care what they do with Ryan Tannehill. I still think Henry is the best idea. I consider them two mutually exclusive things.
I do think, though, and again, we'll kind of get into this because I don't want to get ahead of ourselves on the show today because, like, how many trades is too many trades to where all of a sudden you're now in a full-blown rebuild, which in the NFL is very different than the NHL or Major League Baseball or the NBA, and we'll talk about that in a second. So, bros, Stoney makes a good point. I agree with him on this. This is a pretty decent, sneaky, underrated running back class.
Well, I wouldn't say underrated because everybody's talking about how good the running back class is. No offense to Stoney, but everybody's talking about it.
Maybe that's true, and maybe I'm not consuming enough of everybody's talk yet about the class. I just look down the ranks and I go like the 9th or 10th best running back in the draft. I'm like, that's a pretty good player right there. And it's just a position that's easier to find in general. And if you can get a 3rd and a 5th, you could draft somebody with that 5th round pick, package them with Dontrell Hilliard, and have a pretty good running game. So, like, I just
trade use those picks to trade up and do something different. Or just, hey, you trade away Derrick Henry, Bijan Robinson right there at the 11th overall pick, all in. Like, I'm all in for that.
So Trey says, if you had to make a trade, just one of them, Henry or Tannehill, it sounds like you're on the Tannehill side.
I don't care. They're equally the same to me.
Okay. Well, ideally, I think Tannehill gets you more in return,
possibly,
and helps you clarify the direction a little bit more, especially with the Schefter report that the Bears are going to keep Justin Fields reportedly today and are shopping the number 1 overall pick. Which
I'm
of
not
course,
big into those kinds of questions. It's like where the people put 4 different movies up and they're like, one's got to go. You know what? If someone told me that, I just politely say, no, I don't have to choose one. Because guess what? I don't have to. I live in fucking America.
Okay.
And let me say this. And here's another one. When will Rand Carthon have the chance again to get his quarterback? This is also from Trey Wynn. J-Rob never did. Now's the time to change a quarterback and running back. J-Rob got his quarterback. He got Ryan Tannehill. J-Rob, listen, let me say something. A GM can draft and get their quarterback any fucking year they want to do it. Nothing is preventing them from doing and drafting a quarterback and going up to get it. So you know what? Rand Carthon will have this year. He'll have next year. He'll have the year after that and the year after that and the year after that. As long as he's employed as general manager, he'll have every opportunity to go get whatever quarterback he wants.
But thank you, Trey, for joining us. Just got eviscerated there. No, I do think, and by the way, the Tannehill, like, that might have been the greatest move that John Robinson ever made he got the Dolphins to pay 3/4 of Ryan Tannehill's salary and got David Long out of the deal. So it is an extremely valuable move for them. Now, again, I think the difference is you can go get your guy. I think the difference is, can you go get the world changing, the guy that is going to start for 14 years? And
it's all about your
you know,
evaluation process, not the process of going to get the quarterback. It's all about how you evaluate the quarterback,
which we'll get to a little bit later on today, because I think people are going to misevaluate some stuff at the combine, but we'll get to that a little bit later on, as well as Pred's comparisons to the Titans and the rebuild and what it takes and all that stuff. New general managers for both professional franchises in Nashville. We, of course, are brought to you by the Kingston Group and the pharmacy, so make sure you go have a burger at the pharmacy, and make sure you go talk to the Kingston Group before you make any big decisions about your house. So, second round pick, obviously. What if it's just a fourth? If you just get a fourth for Derrick Henry, are you doing it to save the $6 million and to get younger at running back?
I mean, I would do it, Braden. I don't think the Titans would.
I agree.
I would do it. I'm just, listen, of all people that cover the Tennessee Titans, of all people that probably follow this team, I'm part of a small subsection that is Alabama fan, Tennessee Titan fan. And I am of the small subsection that has watched probably Derrick Henry back before anybody else did. That's an Alabama fan. Because a lot.
Did you know he's from the Jacksonville area?
I did.
Did you know that?
So, to me, I should have all this sentimental experience and want to hold on to Derrick Henry. I don't give a shit. Like, and this is not to say that I, of anything other than I don't run the Tennessee Titans. My investment into the Tennessee Titans extends beyond one player. If you remember how everybody acted about Jarrell Casey getting traded for a 6th round pick or whatever it was, and guess what? He didn't do anything. And Derrick Henry will probably still be able to do something. He may do like an Emmitt Smith, Eddie George style kind of deal.
Right.
He is not the game changer. And if you are wanting the Tennessee Titans to be something a little bit more modern, he doesn't really fit with what you need.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Do it. We've seen it done 3 years ago with 2019 and 2020. We've seen him be involved in a explosive offense, but he is not that player anymore. Can he come back and be that player? I bet maybe. Is it going to be a 2,000-yard guy? No.
No, I agree with that. My question is, does the 75% version of Derrick Henry still provide enough value for this franchise that they can evolve the offense around 75% of him? Frankly, again, Hilliard, you could argue, is one of the 3 or 4 most explosive weapons on the offense right now today. And so getting him more reps in certain situations is probably a smart thing to do. I'm with you. I don't think the market is as bullish as people think. I think it's like a 4th round pick, maybe a 3rd if you're lucky, for a guy that, is pretty good, but near getting he's a depreciating asset. One of the few things John Robinson was actually good at was knowing when to cut bait on a player or a decision. One of the only things he was good at. I don't think it's going to happen, though, because I think he's worth more to them than a 4th round pick to the Titans. I think.
McCaffrey went for a 2nd, 3rd, and 4th in 2023 and a 2024 5th. So he went for 4 picks. I feel that Derrick Henry should at least net you 2 picks, and I think 2 picks is the conversation of what it would take for the Titans to move on from him.
Okay. I think if it's a 4th, like you said, they won't do it. If it's a 3rd and a 5th, I think they might do it. But that's we're speculating and being what'd you call it? Aggregation regurgitators or something like that. And yes, it always comes back to Dontrell Hilliard. I like that player. I think he's a good player. He's cheap and he does things.
The good news is that you can find a Dontrell Hilliard in the draft or in free agency. That's actually better.
Yeah. Isn't all this talk about 2024 and beyond? Isn't all this talk about 2024 and beyond? This is from Ed Henry. No relation to Derrick here, or we've already
established that in the Football and Other F Words chat.
Okay, we got no spies here. All right. Tannehill and Henry won't be around after that anyway, so why not cut bait now? I think. I mean, again, they're mutually exclusive to your point, but I do think that, and this kind of takes us into our next topic here. Unless you want anything else to add about Derrick Henry.
No, I will say this: don't get wrapped up in dead money. I'm just so sick of people talking about dead money. You've already paid it. It's going to be dead money whether they stay here, the player stays here, or whether they get traded. As long as you've already paid the dead money, it's going to remain dead money. So don't get wrapped up in it. Guess what? It's all gone after once you trade a player or release a player in the current year and it's a pre-June 1st designation, guess what? That dead money will be gone after this year. It does not matter.
Yep. $10 million for Henry. So if you trade him or cut him, right, you get about 6.3 million more. And as we talked about on Thursday, you should go listen to that show. We talked about all the cap implications of all the recent moves, and that they're pretty close to having upwards of $30 or $40 million in space. So there's so just the $6 million may be a huge factor. It's more about, I imagine, the draft capital coming back and how that they can get younger and cheaper and more explosive and more versatile, which is what Rand Carthon wants to do with Mike Vrabel's team, which leads us to what the Predators have done in Nashville, which is, of course, the most Nashville Predators thing of all time, which is David Poile stepping down in the middle of a total fire sale and announcing his retirement. The trade deadline is on Friday, and they've already traded Tanner Jeannot and Nito Niederreiter for like 11 draft picks. The draft it will be here in the NHL next year, so there's certainly some extra maybe motivation there. Barry Trotz, an old coach, is going to be the general manager. Two very different strategies from two very different types of ownership groups that have sort of resulted in major changes for both of these organizations. And my first observation, Zach, before I let you explore the studio space, is that the Titans, with a more singular owner in Amy Adams Strunk, went outside of the organization. I would argue cast a much wider net than the offensive coordinator search, did their diligence, and found a guy who is extremely qualified, has a lot of experience, and is logically taking the next step in his career in Rand Carthon. The Preds are doing a very different thing. They're going back to their old coach who's got zero experience because it feels good. Now, it may be, if it works out, it will be an extraordinary success. The fans will go nuts. They'll love it. But there's two very different approaches. And I think some of that is because the Predators waited too long to do what the Titans are doing right now.
Ooh, see, this is interesting. I like here's where I'm at on this, is that I have been very much of the thought process and pro thought process that the Tennessee Titans do not view themselves that they are in a rebuilding mode. Okay. From everything they've said, from most of the moves that they have made, and from everything that you've heard leaked out of St. Thomas Sports Park, they are not in rebuilding mode. You know who else wasn't in rebuilding mode when they should have been in rebuilding mode? David Poile a couple of years ago with the Predators.
Yep.
So in my big question, my big takeaway from this is wondering, are the Titans just kicking the can and trying to avoid eventual rebuild, or is it time to go ahead? Like, I know that they're retooling. I know that they're going to remain competitive. However, I have always said I am okay with a rebuild. Because I don't think it's going to be as long as a rebuild as what the Predators are facing, because they have kicked the can down the road. So the question is, you're a big Predators guy. You followed this team. You went to the press conference, so you know the ins and outs. The Gold Standard podcast. I mean,
yeah, look at that.
And now you're following the Tennessee Titans, and football show, all this stuff. So I ask you, from your perspective, would they be would the Predators have been in a better position if they had started the rebuild 2 years ago? And will we look back in 3 years and say the Titans really started their rebuild and learned from the Nashville Predators and started their rebuild in 2023?
So could my answer be yes? The Predators, when they went through their competitive rebuild about, I think it was 2 off seasons ago, where they got rid of Arvidsson and Ryan Ellis and some of the main pieces, and they sort of tried to sort of stay competitive, right? Changed coaches with Peter Laviolette, move on to John Hines. I think they would have been better blowing the whole thing up. Now, so the answer to your first question is yes. And my answer to the Titans question is also, I think they should be leaning more into the rebuild a little bit more than you think. But here's the good news for Titans fans. Because the sports are so dramatically different, because the rules and the contracts are guaranteed in hockey, and you can't trade like 3 of the players on the team with no movement clauses. Like sometimes it takes 4 or 5 years of real garbage hockey to truly rebuild. Very few teams can do it like in a 2-year window. In the NFL, you can find so many pieces so quickly if you do it really, really, really well, whether that's the offensive coordinator, whether that's a safety in the 5th round, whether that's a guard, like if you hit on a guy, you can change, you can go from, look at the Bengals. Like the Bengals did it in like 2 years. So I think the Titans, the reason I would like the Titans to lean into this a little bit more, frankly, is because our conversation we just had about Tannehill and Henry. I think it's time. They still have some value. Get the value now while you can, but that pushes you into more of a rebuild situation. Oh, by the way, which is not a bad thing because you have a new general manager, a new offensive coordinator, new pieces in place to run all of that. And you're picking higher than you've ever picked before, or at least in the last 4 or 5 years. There's also a pretty good draft class of quarterbacks coming up right now. I think I'm a little bit more of it's going to be one bad year maybe.
But yeah, I mean, it may not even be that bad of a year. That's right, the thing, right?
Who's to say they wouldn't be able to be right back winning the division in 2 seasons? Like
they were so close to winning the season this year without Ryan Tannehill winning the division this past year without Ryan Tannehill. Like how many players can the Titans trade away? Okay, so if they trade away Ryan Tannehill, Derrick Henry, let a couple other maybe do something with Kevin Byard. I don't know. But if let's say crazy scenario, Ryan Tannehill, Derrick Henry, Kevin Byard all get traded away in the same offseason. This offseason, they get all these picks, okay?
And all the
crazy
other guys
scenario.
And all the guys have been cut that have already been cut.
Yeah. Jeffrey Simmons is the only guy that you brought back. And let's say you bring back David Long as well. Okay. No Nate Davis. Let's say David Long, Jeffrey Simmons in this scenario come back. Don't you think that they can pretty much probably, depending on the draft class of free agency and Mike Vrabel being Mike Vrabel, they can still win 9 games, right? I mean, isn't that crazy to think this team could still be competitive?
Look, when you traded A.J. Brown, you began the rebuild process of the receiving core. You've already let go Robert Woods. You've already drafted, you let Jonnu Smith and Corey Davis to leave. Like the skill position players outside of Derrick Henry have already begun the rebuild process with Burks and Phillips and Okonkwo now as the focus. You add some more pieces to that this offseason. The offensive line is already in complete rebuild mode because if you let Davis and Lawan and Ben Jones go, you're in complete rebuild.
Hell is practically in rebuild mode throughout the it was like being patched together with trash can lids and toothpicks.
You got a new general manager and a new offensive staff with a new offensive line coach. Like you are already it feels like you're already 75% of the way down the road. And the last pieces are the 2 veterans that still have value to you right now and possibly on the trade market at quarterback and running back. And to me, this is partly why I've always agreed with your stance on trading Tannehill and frankly, if I'm Carthon, and this is maybe cynically, I'm saying this, but if you're Carthon and you trade Ryan Tannehill and you trade Derrick Henry, ownership and Mike Vrabel has to look at you and say, you've got a little bit more time to solve the problem, but you better go solve the problem.
But in the spirit of collaboration, they've signed off on those moves.
I agree.
So they've already said, not only do you have the job security, we're right here standing beside you.
I agree. And I think a rebuild in the NFL is almost always the right answer if you're already headed that direction anyway, because you can turn it around so fast. In other sports, it takes forever. You need 3 or 4 or 5 top 5 picks in the NHL or baseball, to eventually build. If you're not one of the big market teams that could just spend all the money in baseball, which again is a different structure than even the NBA, where it's all about just, are you in a big market with 3 superstars? In the NHL, it takes years of sucking. The Colorado Avalanche were terrible for 10 years, and they built the team with first number 1 overall picks, and then they won a cup. This is how, the Coyotes are doing this right now. The Blackhawks did it. They were terrible. They won 3 cups because they drafted in the top 5 year after year after year after year. And it's just different in the NFL. Like you said, you can go find your quarterback if you trust the evaluation process at any point. Mostly. Last year's draft class maybe aside.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, yeah.
Most of the time, if you are anywhere near the top 15, you can find a guy that probably could start for you for a decade. And if, to me, this all makes too much sense to make the clean transition a 2023 year. Now, if they don't, here's the question back to you. If they don't trade Tannehill and Derrick Henry, are they slowing down that? Maybe they're good this year. Maybe they win the division. Maybe they win 10 games and they have a host of playoff game. So they're better because they have Tannehill and Henry, right? my question is how detrimental could that be to the future of the franchise? Because then they can't get as much in the trade market in the future. Maybe they have to walk away from those guys. Maybe the evolution of the offense doesn't happen as quickly. Like, what's the negative of keeping them?
I mean, like, if those guys are here in 2023, you would most likely expect to be on extensions to get their cap hits down, because you still need to build around for the future. And now the extensions don't mean that they're here for 5 more years or they're here at crazy numbers. It can all be managed appropriately. In theory, it can. Maybe not in practice, but in theory, it can. But I get the feeling that we would be here in 4 years saying, didn't get a Super Bowl, sure did waste a lot of time. And now we're here, because while you still can go get those quarterbacks or go get those pieces for the future and foundations for the future, I think in the rebuild, if you got rid of Byard, Henry, and Tannehill, and you still had, if you're talking about the win difference between having those 3 players and not having those 3 players, I think it's like 1.5 to 2 wins. I know that sounds crazy.
That's how much Ryan Tannehill, Derrick Henry, and Kevin Byard are worth. Is
I think Derrick Henry is not worth 1 win. He's worth 0 wins. Okay, Derrick Henry is worth 0 wins. We've seen it in practice, and we've just seen it. It's just he's worth 0 wins. Tannehill, I don't know if Byard's really worth a win. I'd say maybe the half is Byard, and I think Tannehill's worth maybe 1 win, because I mean he was part of that losing streak too. Maybe I'm underestimated, but in theory, I don't think you're not talking about, right? Like we just said, with Ryan Tannehill and all these guys, yeah, you could probably get 10 wins. And I said earlier, and you kind of agreed with me, and maybe you were just nodding your head and saying, yeah, just, for radio purposes and stuff. But we said that he could. Don't you think that Mike Vrabel could win 9 or 8 games without those guys?
So that's
they're just really worth 2 wins when you think about it.
So I think if you're saying what's the best case scenario for this team with Byard, Tannehill, and let's say again, all the other pieces are sort of the same, right? They invest the same assets in the same positions: receiver, tight end, offensive line, linebacker, whatever. Like all the other assets are considered equal, right? The only 3 variables we're changing are Henry, Tannehill, and Byard, for example, in this conversation. I think their upside is like 10, 11 wins. You win the division. That's like if everything goes well, you draft well, you fix the offensive line, do everything right. I think without those 3 pieces, they're far more like a 6-win team. And maybe
you
7.
Didn't really agree with me. You're just kind of
I was agreeing with your point, and I think your point is totally valid that they can still be a pretty salty, competitive week in and week out football team without those pieces. But I don't think they're a playoff team without those pieces. And some of it depends on what happens next. If they were to move on from all those guys and they get some extra picks and they go up to 1 and they get Bryce Young and then they draft like Kenny McIntosh in the 5th round and they pair him with somebody good and the offensive line is better, like that 6 wins all of a sudden maybe becomes 8 or 9 wins. And that's where I think that's where I think the rebuild could happen so fast. And I think ultimately the lesson here, the 2 positives I would take away from this if I'm a Titans fan from the Preds situation and kind of the comp is that Amy Adams-Strunk was not scared to make a big decision quickly. The Predators have been scared to make this decision for years. And I think it's going to benefit the Titans that they did it so fast, moving on from John Robinson. And that they went outside to find a true new set of eyes for that role at GM. And that I think you can do it real quickly in the NFL. I just think you can do it. I think you've got it. You're already like 62% of the way down the rebuild road already. Like you trade Derrick Henry, trade Ryan Tannehill, and you've kind of finished off the rebuild there. Like,
yeah,
like on offense at least.
Matt Bell says, would Vrabel lose his job if they rebuild and lose? He probably does do that, is why Vrabel will not sign off on a rebuild. I'll say this. If the rebuild is in effect, Mike Vrabel has signed off on the rebuild.
Yeah.
And if you got Amy Adams-Strunk, John Robin or Rand Carthon and Mike Vrabel sitting in a room, and they've already decided whether it's a rebuild or retool, whether they're lying to us or they're telling us the truth is a totally different scenario. But they have already sat down, the 3 of them decided, are we rebuilding or are we retooling? And if they, in fact, are rebuilding and they're just lying to us, they're all 3 in on it. This is a collaboration. So Mike Vrabel's job is safe, which he's a top 10 head coach anyway. And if they're choosing to rebuild and he loses, that was going to happen, right? I mean, like
that was part of the plan. Yeah.
Part of the rebuild. And obviously not tanking, but just unfortunately losing games and losing close games, not tanking. That is part of the process of a rebuild is losing games. The process of the rebuild is not to win games. However, I do think Mike Vrabel could win a lot of games, even in a rebuild year.
And
let me say this. It's not Derrick Henry is 0 wins. No, there is no such thing as running back wins. We have never heard of running back wins as a stat. I don't even believe in QB wins as a stat, but running back is not a
no
win.
wins above replacement.
I don't I don't think I'm sure he's not worth any wins above replacement either. I think, in fact, he wasn't, if I'm not mistaken.
No, and zero is not like necessarily, like, I'm not going to sit here and say like, oh, yes or no. Like, because again, we've seen evidence of like 8 straight games where like he didn't play and they ran the ball pretty well. I do think losing your starting quarterback of 4 or 5 years, I think you clearly are going to take a step back depending on what the option is. If it's a bridge gap kind of player that's a mediocre player, you could probably win 6-7 games. If it's a rookie quarterback who's got lots of talent, maybe you win 7 or 8 games, and clearly you see the talent that's there. But I agree that they're not doing this without Vrabel being a part of the decision-making process. And I don't necessarily – and here's the other thing. Like, it could change tomorrow. Like, the 3 of them could sit down in a room and say, no, because here's the other thing. They could have done an extension or a restructure with Tannehill at any moment if he was truly their guy. They are clearly shopping him as hard as they can to make sure they get his best an offer. The other angle from the Preds is that their head coach is probably going to be out on the street at the end of the season. And that's not the case with this organization. They know who their coach is. At least they should. And he's a part of the future. And he's one of the better in the NFL. And the Preds don't even know who that's going to be. So, like, I think those are also very different situations. So you have more structure to do the rebuild quicker because Vrabel's in place and a part of the process. And so, again, I think tomorrow somebody could come blow their socks off with some better deal for a player that they weren't considering selling as a part of this situation, and the situation could change. Like, if somebody comes and says, hey, we'll give you a 1st and a 3rd for Ryan Tannehill, like, yep, we're in rebuild mode. Yep. Right? Like, if there's nothing out there and it's like a 4th and a 6th, oh, we're gonna roll with Tannehill. Like, it can change from day to day depending on what other people do. So otherwise, that was – I think the Preds fans will tell you this has been a long time coming. They've been very frustrated, and they've not been going to games to voice their opinion about the situation.
I feel right now the Tennessee Titans fan base and a lot of the Tennessee Titans local media are wanting the rebuild just like the Predators fans and media analysts were wanting the rebuild 2 years ago. And I'm getting a lot of similarities from these two teams. And as far as the timeline of how the team is constructed, how the team can compete, and where the team is going to be at later down the road. It's not necessarily about the GM. It's about what you're hearing now is about the Titans, exactly what you heard 2 years ago. And David Poyle kicked the rebuild down the road and kicked it. Yep. And I think the Tennessee Titans are doing it for all intents and purposes, for everything that we have heard coming out of the building. The message is this is a retooling, not a rebuild.
I guess that's where that's the one thing I'll disagree slightly on, because you get, like, to me, the reason there is a giant exhale with the Predators fans today is because it has begun finally. Like, it's a sellable commodity to your fans to say we're making changes. And I think the Titans did it at really key positions, firing Todd Downing, firing John Robinson, cutting Taylor Lewan. Like, they have moved on to a new era of football. Is it as complete an overhaul as maybe you want? Maybe not. Is the temperature of the fan base kind of similar to what you're saying? I think that's fair. I think the temperature of the fans is about the same, but I don't get the sense that the fans are angry about what the Titans are doing right now. I think the fans are excited about it, right? Like, hey, Rand's here, Vrabel's here. We got the new coordinator. But
they're wanting a rebuild. They're wanting to rebuild. Fans are wanting to rebuild. Now,
okay, I
will say this: fans are idiots. Fans are wanting a rebuild while clinging to Derrick Henry and clinging to valuable assets. Now, that is a totally different conversation because fans aren't smart.
Yeah. If you're going to do the rebuild, you have to make tough decisions. That's it. Like, that's what the Predators are doing right now. by trading a guy who scored 19 goals, for a second-round pick, by trading a guy who was a Rookie of the Year candidate last year and the highest-scoring rookie in franchise history. They just traded him, and they're probably going to trade Matthias Ekholm away, one of their best defense, a lifelong Predator, a guy who's entrenched in the community and sentimental and all this other stuff, right? You gotta do that. You got to do that to truly rebuild. So I think they're just so far down the road that they're already kind of doing it. And Tannehill is the writing's on the wall for both Henry and Tannehill. Like they are what they are at their age and their price point. I mean, you either get something for them now, or maybe you win a couple games this year with them. I don't know. Yeah. Like that's kind of where we are with that. All right, let's make sure you support good local business, the Kingston Group, the pharmacy. You want a good burger? You want a good beer, locally sourced? Go to the pharmacy. They're fantastic folks over there. Got the great vibes inside. If they trade Derrick Henry, you need a place to drown your sorrows. Go to the pharmacy. Great place to eat some meat and drink some beer and drown your sorrows. And, of course, the Kingston Group, buildkg.com is the website. Make sure you talk to them about any home needs you have, renovations, a new wing. I don't know, Zach, if you ever wanted to build a new wing on your house, you just call the Kingston Group,
There you go.
Whole new wing.
I like it.
A rebuild and a retool of Zach's house, the Kingston Group.
There you go.
That's how they're going to do it. All right, so let's get into the combine here. And what is the thing that actually matters? What is the thing that actually matters at the combine? My opinion is not the size of your hand. It's not your broad jump. It's not your 40 time, how fast you run in a straight line in underwear, which never happens on a football field except for maybe wide receivers. It is about your medical evaluation for me and about how you interview with like who you are and how you can showcase your skills and how you talk with people, how you present yourself. Those are the things, getting to know the teams and the players. Those are the things that matter the most. Those are the two things you cannot see on television. But in my opinion, those are the two things that matters most. To you, Zach Lyons, what are the things that matter most about the combine?
Well, there's certain things that matter for certain positions, right? Like not all positions are created equally. So the combine drills do matter for certain positions. And there are certain drills that matter more than other ones. Like the when you're talking about something like the broad jump, you're looking at lower body strength and explosiveness. Not only that, but you demonstrate good balance and body control on the landing. That matters for like a wide receiver, a tight end, a running back, not necessarily for a quarterback, right?
Or defensive tackle.
Yeah, defensive tackle. I mean, the explosiveness, lower body strength and explosiveness does matter. I mean, like you got a lot of offensive linemen that are destroying some broad jumps when you go back and look at the data. And it's great. It's great for a guy their size, right? You got to kind of look at the size of the person too, because Calvin Austin, who was a wide receiver last year, who ran a blazing fast 40. Well, I mean, he's also a really small guy. Like some of this stuff matters, some of it doesn't. For 3-cone splits do matter for not only just your offensive linemen, but also your wide receivers and your DBs.
Short space agility. Short space agility is a good important one.
The 40-yard dash really doesn't do much for me. I'm with you on that. I think the 10-yard split is a better measure, for offensive lineman, defensive lineman, wide receiver, your short air explosion again on the 10-yard split. The 20-yard split measures the acceleration, and the quicker you can reach and maintain a speed, the quicker the player is. So like I look at it from those. The 40 is pretty cool. It's a cool number to have. It's a cool record to break and all this stuff. But ultimately, it doesn't translate into anything. A.J. Brown had a 4.55. Traylon Burks was like a 4.56.
I was just about to look that up because I think 4.5. I think anything under 4.6 is totally fine for a wide receiver.
4.52. And like people are like, well, if 4.49. He had a 4.49. That was Michael Pittman with the 4.52. And people are like, JSN, they're like, well, if he's a 4.6, oh, you can't. That's going to destroy him. You can't draft him. He'll fall into the second round. And I'm thinking, dude, it doesn't really matter. I mean, like DeAndre Hopkins ran a 4.57. DK Metcalf was a 4.62. Like that stuff doesn't matter. What matters is these other numbers. So I do think the drills do matter. I think your measurements matter. Like specifically for Bryce Young, he's not showing up to do anything other than interviews, right? It's fine. I don't need to see him throw. I've saw him. Anybody has seen Bryce Young throw over these last 2 years know that he can throw the football better than any of these other quarterbacks can. Right. Like he's already the best passer.
Right.
He's obviously not getting measured yet, even though people have said he comes in at 5'10 and a half already in height. He's not getting weighed yet because he's not at the weight that he wants to be. It's a pretty obvious thing. We'll see at the pro day.
Yeah.
That's really what's going to matter for him. Because if at this point his height is his height, if he's 5'10 and a half, some GMs are scared of his height, not even his weight, his height, according to Dov Kleiman talking to Todd McShay, who's talking to a scout.
Right.
Which, let me tell you something. If 5'10 and a half as a height scares you and you're a scout, you're probably going to get fired soon. Like at some point, some of these anonymous scouts are just scouts on the hot seat that are about to get their ass fired.
It should scare you for a player who's not the best quarterback in the draft.
Yeah.
like watch. I will always say this, and it's the combine is a fine. Like to me, the combine is good at weeding out like the true negative assets, right? Like if you're a defensive tackle and you can do like 225 reps and you're just not very strong, like the only time it truly weeds people out for me is if it's like such a bad number that it like it's very and that
didn't even weed out Wan'Dale Robinson for
right
you.
Right. Well, but to your point, it's like which drills are better for which positions. And Devontae Adams was a 4.56 guy. Like you can play great wide receiver with 4.5, 4.6 running speed.
And listen, Bryce Young is 5'10 and a half. That's a lot taller than I thought he was actually going to come in at. Like I thought he would be like 5'8, 5'9. So 5'10 and a half is pretty good.
So, and Trey asked this because I want to focus on the quarterbacks because I do think there's going to be a lot of narratives coming out of the combine about these 4 quarterbacks. And I want to make sure we're on record with some receipts ahead of time because Anthony Richardson, of course, is going to go to the combine and do all the combine things. And people they're going to drool on themselves.
Analysts and fans are going to drool on themselves.
Yes.
Anybody that has watched this film is not going to be surprised by anything they see unless he does something
exactly
elite and otherworldly.
I think his athleticism is going to test off the charts in almost every single category.
Which is exactly what he shows on tape.
Right. You should know that from the first snap of his career at Florida when he ran for like 87 yards and was like running past defensive backs. I think Will Levis is going to test pretty well. And I think what's going to come out of this combine conversation with Will Levis is going to be how good he was in interviews. He was so good in interviews.
Oh, it's the Hendon Hooker story. Like Hendon Hooker's writing for The Athletic right
Yep.
now, a diary. Like I like Hendon Hooker as a person, but my God, is he reaching some Russell Wilson, like overexposure, like annoying the fuck out of me levels right now. Because I don't need a diary from Hendon Hooker. Well, and guess what? I know that he's going to kill the combine interviews because guess what? He killed the Senior Bowl interviews already.
Well, he's a very again. My issues with Hendon Hooker are like why he runs so gangly and why his throwing motion is so long and the simplicity of the offense. Like it's not about leadership. It's not about I think Levis has to overcome his tape. His tape is not particularly great. I think what's going to happen is like you and I both agree Bryce Young is the best player in the draft at this position. CJ Stroud is probably the most complete at the combine, right? Like he's going to go to the combine.
He's got the frame. He's got the arm. He's got the IQ.
And the tape and the statistical production and the Bryce. I think CJ Stroud is going to come out of this week of the combine as the number 1 quarterback on the draft class because he's going to check every box. I don't think he's better than Bryce Young. But I think Bryce Young, the story is going to be all the stuff that's very obvious, which is going to be he's a little too small, he's a little too thin, he's this, he's that. But we love this and we love that about him. And people are going to drool all over Richardson's athletic ability. And I think the board is going to change coming out of the combine based on stuff that's not playing football. That's my issue with the combine. Like Trayvon Walker went number 1 overall because of the combine, but not because of his tape.
But I think we both agree that the big boards largely remain unchanged after the combine by the NFL teams. It's the analysts who initially got their scouting wrong that let the combine influence their big boards on the websites for clicks more than anything else.
Well, and I think what gets clicks on Twitter and on Instagram, what gets plays, what gets views. Well, a guy breaking a 40-time record, right?
Right.
I mean, I don't have to tell Titans fans about Chris Henry, okay?
Yeah.
Running back Chris Henry, who played 4 games for Arizona and was a starting running back in college football for like 1 game his entire career, and then he did a bunch of crazy awesome shit at the combine, and Jeff Fisher, I think, who's the coach at the time, just drafts him in like the 2nd round maybe. And it's like, what are we doing? What are we doing with the guy who's like never been good at football? Like, don't.
It basically what you're just doing is you're looking for the athleticism to match the tape, right? I mean,
Bingo,
that's what
bingo.
everybody's really looking for. If you're surprised that Anthony Richardson comes out of this the fastest, strongest quarterback the NFL has ever seen, then you did not watch the tape.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think Matt Miller said it in his article. I think it was on Friday for ESPN. He wrote about it's not about what Anthony Richardson does on the run in these underwear throwing drills and all that kind of stuff. It's not about it's like, how far can he throw flat-footed without any setup? Like Josh Allen, threw that 70 or 75-yard bomb, at the combine. They got everybody crazy. They got everybody
off platform.
Yeah. He got everybody. He got scouts to jump out of their seats. Is there going to be that moment for Anthony Richardson? Yes. Is it going to change drastically where he's at on everybody's big board? Maybe one spot, maybe two spots. But in the end, Josh Allen still went, 12th overall? So, like, it wasn't he
was
still
7th.
beat. Yeah, 7th, but he still didn't beat out Baker Mayfield and Sam Darnold.
No, I think the NFL seems pretty split on Anthony Richardson in general. We don't know what that split is, if it's 50-50, if it's like 60-40, if it's
you got the
70-30.
anonymous scout that said that, I think we got him as a 4th round grade. If you got Anthony Richardson as a 4th round grade, again, you're one of those scouts that are about to be fired. You may need to freshen up your resume because that is not even close.
Grading, but then you're grading again. This is the issue with Richardson and why he's so divisive, is that you're grading the traits. You're not in the skills and you're not grading like Bryce Young doesn't have to show us anything. I don't think CJ Stroud really has to show us a whole lot. Like, I think he's put on tape multiple years of elite production with big size on. Will Levis has to prove that the tape doesn't match what he's going to be in the NFL, the way Josh Allen had to prove that the tape.
That's not really going to happen at the combine, though.
No, exactly.
That's the problem with. Let me say this. That's the problem with the combines part of the quarterback evaluation process. You're not going to be able to prove it. I guess where it's really proven is when you're in the one-on-ones and you got the whiteboard and they ask you about plays. I guess that's where it's going to get proven, because it's not going to be shown in the Wonderlic test. There's this new cognitive test that's out of Nashville that's going to measure a lot and possibly game change.
Processing speed, right? Is what it measures.
Yeah. Which I guess John Robinson decided to ignore that person or that whole establishment, even though it's right in his backyard, because he.
So you know how our whole motto is like no empty calories on our show, on your show, like no empty calories. We want to give you thoughtful, nuanced, information and conversation about topics you care about. But then like we post a clip on social media. What gets traction from the combine is not the stuff that is actually in the show, right? It's the empty calories is what draws attention. It's what is good television. It's what plays on social media. The empty calories of the combine is what you see everywhere. You don't see the actual nutritional value of, here's Anthony Richardson diagnosing this play in a half a second, or here's, Hendon Hooker's ACL medicals are actually really good and he's way ahead of schedule on recovery. Like, you don't see any of the actual stuff that matters. And all the stuff that people consume and report on is all this other, empty calorie stuff.
You'd like to see Will Levis have different speeds to his throwing. I mean, because his throwing velocity is like the same speed, and you could almost say the same thing about Anthony Richardson.
I agree.
So maybe you get a little bit of touch, but so hard for the combine. To me personally, I think quarterback, outside of like kickers and punters, quarterback is like the position I walk away with the least amount of change from and the least amount of new knowledge with. Receivers, defensive backs, edge rushers, tight ends, these other athletic types, those are where I really focus in on. And that's not just because the Tennessee Titans technically have never needed a quarterback the last few years. It's just nothing you can really take away from it. I mean, you remember how everybody was all up in arms about Malik Willis? Like, he was throwing the ball and he was looking good and blah, blah, blah. In the end, the problem with him was always the mental part of the game. And
everybody passed on him 3 times.
Passed on him 3 times, right?
Right.
And here with Anthony Richardson, you have the pocket manager, field general guy pre-snap. Anthony Richardson has shown that on tape. You go watch the Anthony Richardson tape, and he is the third best quarterback in this draft.
I agree.
Will he be talked about by the talking heads as the second best or the first best? Will there be stupid leaks that come out that say, I think he could go number 1 overall?
Yep.
Sure.
Yep.
That stuff happens every year, every draft in some form or fashion. But at the end of the day, he'll be the third quarterback off the board.
Yeah, you and I think Bryce Young is number 1, CJ Stroud's number 2. Mm-hmm. Then there's a little bit of a gap. Then there's Anthony Richardson. Then there's another gap, and then there's Will Levis and Hendon Hooker. That's basically that's basically how you and I kind of agree on.
I would put Hendon Hooker over Will Levis just because I am so far out on Will Levis. The tape just is too atrocious to ignore. People say the 2021 Georgia game. I went back and watched that game the other day. 4.5 yards per attempt.
Yeah, well, that was a.
He didn't even get 200 yards. It wasn't a good game from Will Levis. I don't understand why people think that was some. You got to watch the 2021 Georgia game. Totally ignore 2022. It was the same thing that you see from every Will Levis game. It's not good. He's just not a very good quarterback.
Yeah, I'm not a defender of Will Levis, but that road game in Georgia against that 40th. A defense that was the best defense in 50 years in college football, and they were on the road. They covered the spread. It was one of his better moments. The offensive line for Kentucky was much better in 2021 than 2022 as well. I just think he has a lot of proving to do. I think you and I have the same 5. We're going to go through the entire week in the combine, and our 5 is not going to change. We're still going to have the same 5. I could see Bryce Young going from 1 to 3 on the media, social media stuff,
because there's already quarterback coaches that are pissing in their Cheerios because, I can't believe Bryce Young's not throwing. He doesn't have to throw. And in fact, CJ Stroud technically didn't have to throw either. Look, if CJ Stroud goes out there and throws and he looks awful, all everybody's going to say is, man, CJ Stroud shouldn't have gone out there and thrown.
Right. I think what's going to happen is Stroud's going to go from 2 to 1. Richardson's going to jump up to is there a battle for number 1 with Richardson and Stroud because of the athletic ability? And Bryce Young's going to sort of sneak through the whole week and not really get talked about all that much other than, man, we don't know about his size. We don't know about his size.
Don't fall in love with Andre Yoshevich, by the way. He's going to be blazing fast. He's terrible. Don't. He's not Christian Watson 2.0. I'll tell you that.
No empty calories, and we'll be here to preview it all again on Thursday as well. I think that just about does it for us today. Make sure you check out the Kingston Group and the Pharmacy, our 2 local, awesome, amazing sponsors here on the show, buildkg.com and the Pharmacy for a beer and a burger, man. And make sure you check out F-Word's show, F-Word's pod. That is, of course,
football and other F-Words.
Football and other F-Words. A football and other F-Words show. That's what we are here on this product. Thank you guys for hanging out. All you guys in the comments were great as well. Get to us on Twitter, rate, review, subscribe. Just, can you do us a favor? And if you're listening at this point of the show, we love you. Please just tell somebody about it. Say, hey, listen, these 2 knuckleheads, they know what they're doing. We like listening. They're fun. Zach says a lot of F words, so go check these guys out. We do appreciate all you guys for hanging out with us. Thanks for listening. For Zach, I am Braden. We'll talk to you guys on Thursday.